Test the given claim. Identify the null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, test statistic, p-value, and then state the conclusion about the null hypothesis, as well as the final conclusion that addresses the original claim. Among 2,101 passenger cars in a particular region, 244 had only rear license plates. Among 336 commercial trucks, 50 had only rear license plates. A reasonable hypothesis is that commercial truck owners violate laws requiring front license plates at a higher rate than owners of passenger cars. Use a 0.01 significance level to test that hypothesis. In the A part, we will test the claim using a hypothesis test. In the B part, we will test the claim by constructing an appropriate confidence interval. In the A part, we are to identify the null and alternative hypotheses for this test. Let population 1 correspond to the passenger cars and population 2 correspond to the commercial trucks. Let a success be a vehicle that has only a rear license plate. In the problem, it stated that a reasonable hypothesis is that commercial truck owners violate laws requiring front license plates at a higher rate than owners of passenger cars. We are told to let population 1 correspond to the passenger cars and population 2 correspond to the commercial trucks. So if the proportion for commercial trucks, which is proportion 2, is to be greater than that for passenger cars, then it is also true that the proportion for passenger cars would be less than the proportion for commercial trucks. So our selection should be D. We are to identify the test statistic and round it to 2 decimal places. We will do this using StatCrunch. So we'll click Question Help, StatCrunch. We will click Stat, Proportion Stats, to Sample with Summary. Sample 1 was the passenger cars. The number of successes was 244. The number of observations was 2,101. Sample 2 was to be the commercial vehicles. The number of successes is 50, and the number of observations is 336. The alternative hypothesis was that P1 was less than P2. Click Compute, and we find a z-stat value of -1.71. Now we are to identify the p-value. The p-value was given to us as 0.0439. We are to round to 3 decimal places, so we will type in 0.044. We were to use a 0.01 significance level, and our p-value turned out to be 0.044. When the p-value is greater than alpha, we do not reject the null hypothesis. So there is not sufficient evidence to support the claim that commercial truck owners violate laws requiring front license plates at a higher rate than owners of passenger cars. So our selection should be D. Now we are to construct a confidence interval that would lead to the same conclusion. Since this was a one-tail test with a 0.01 level of significance, then there is 0.01 of the distribution in the lower tail. But with a confidence interval, if we want to have the same critical values and draw the same conclusion, we would have 0.01 of the distribution in each tail. So we should use a 98% confidence interval. So we will return to the output box for the hypothesis test and click Options and then Edit. This preserves the data that we entered into the program originally. Now we want to construct a confidence interval. So we'll click Confidence Interval, and we decided that this should be a 98% confidence interval, and we'll click Compute. And we find our lower and upper limits for the confidence interval. We are to round to 4 decimal places. So our left interval endpoint will be -0.0807. And our upper interval endpoint will be 0.0153. The interesting thing about this interval is that it does contain 0. If the interval contains 0, then it's possible that these population proportions are equal, meaning no difference. So because the confidence interval limits contain 0, there is not a significant difference between the two proportions. So there is not sufficient evidence to support the claim that commercial truck owners violate laws requiring front license plates at a higher rate than owners of passenger cars.